Because Jerry won't be here and Tracy's out of town. Right. Yeah, let's get this started. All right, I call to order the Planning and Zoning meeting for January 15th, 2024. 2025. Duh. Thanks. Is there any conflicts with the agenda items?
None for me.
All right. Then, do we guys have any comments for any of the minutes? I went over them and didn't see anything.
Madam Chairman, I just noticed one that, and I didn't get a chance to ask Callie. I think I was not listed as being in attendance on, I think it's December 11th. I think that's the one because it was one of them, but I was there.
All right, anything from you, Heather?
No.
All right.
Then I will make a motion to approve the minutes from November 26th, 2024, December 4th, 2024, December 11th, 2024, and then also January 8th, 2025.
With the change that David...
With the change, yes, that Dave Burton was in attendance on December 11th.
All right, can I get a second?
Second.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
All right, it looks like it passed. We'll move on to number 4 now. Dan, do you want to tell us anything about that, or should I just...
Yep. Let me introduce Reed Erickson. Some of you may have met Reed. Some of you may not. He's the county planner. This is a courtesy / I don't know what you call it. This is definitely a county issue, county jurisdiction, but it involves Paragon. It involves the it involves the area that's within our annexation policy plan. So it does affect Parowan. But it is something that the county is doing, and there's been a little bit of a stir about it. He did present in county commission, and so he's here to tell us about what the county is doing, but it affects immediately around what goes on in our general plan with our annexation policy plan. So having said that, Reed?
Thank you, Dan. Appreciate being here, taking some of your time this evening. It's good to see some of you, most of you I know, and appreciate your efforts to plan for Parowan, and that's really what we're doing. And I think in addition to adding to what Dan said is a coordination effort between the town and the county to say what's best for that immediate area adjacent to the current city boundary that is in the jurisdiction of the county, but that would and most likely would be soon or in the future annexed into Parowan City, and how do we facilitate that land development pattern in the unincorporated area that would best help the city grow and meet the needs for their future growth. That's really what we're talking about. So a lot of this comes out of the fact that we recently in the county did a septic tank density analysis, which was a study done by the Utah Geological Survey in 2023. In 2005, and let me just move this to give a little historical context of why we're here. The county had zoning in around 1980 when the county first initiated any zoning. And at that time, what they did was they just took a block of property around the municipalities and zoned it 1 acre, half acre, 80, and we haven't touched that since then. So 45 years later, we're still having the zoning that was envisioned at that time, and it really doesn't fit very well with what development patterns we've seen and what we've learned as a result of some of the other studies that we've done. And that's why I've listed all of these things have taken place since then, and we now believe it's time to do some good planning in coordination with the municipalities. So we have already been to Canaryville and done this process for their annexation area and what we call the Tier 2 area. Okay, so in 1995, the county established a Tier policy program, which was a general plan adopted growth management strategy, if you will. The idea was that a municipality would be the center of growth for the counties, where the higher density, urban densities belong, rather than having the pattern of leapfrog, haphazard development spread out all over the whole county, which is not good development patterns in terms of trying to provide services in those rural areas spread out hither and thither, especially when most of those developments were done prior to there being even a subdivision ordinance in the county, and those things were just done randomly with a napkin plat taken in and recorded at the recorder's office. And we're left with a lot of that throughout the county, and we're trying to deal with that. But we thought in 1995 that we ought to have some different development pattern. And so the pattern was that we would do a tiering system. And so this ordinance 205 that's on the county website, and you can read in greater detail, this just happens to be off of, it's the title of the ordinance, and then out of page 6 in that ordinance, it explains the tiers. So the tier 1, again, is the existing municipality. Tier 2 is their urban expansion area around the municipality through which growth would typically occur because it was identified for the growth area of the municipality when they did their annexation policy plan. Now, granted, in 1995, the state law requirements for annexation policy plans were a lot different than they are today, and it's good to revisit that because now they've targeted a 20-year growth window, where before it was no window. Whatever, and in 1995, the county used the municipality's annexation policy boundary to establish the Tier 2 area. So they said if that's what the municipality believes is their growth area, then that is what we'll use for a growth area for urban densities, and could allow a higher density than what we would allow out in other places. So if there are going to be subdivisions that develop and don't annex, then we'll say they need to be next to the municipalities where there's likelihood that they could get some services and be part of that community, whether it's water, sewer, or just the fact that roads lead in and out and they're part of that community. Tier 3 was at that time Summit and Newcastle. It was a future urbanizing area that wasn't attached or near another municipality. And in 2005, when we did this amendment, it also expanded that ability of a Tier 3 to become a new urban area, like a municipality. And we've had 3 of them approved since that time. None of them have been built. The biggest one was 1,700 acres up by Bryan Head, which was a Tier 3 Aspen Creek development, and it was annexed into Bryan Head Town recently. But in 2006 and 2007, when this was approved, Bryan Head didn't have the same philosophy that they have now, and they weren't willing to work with the resort in their development plans, and I'm glad that things have changed since then. We also have a Three Peaks Golf community that was developed as you could call it a master plan community if you want, out by Three Peaks with a 18-hole golf course designed into it, and it was done in 2007, 2008, right when the economy said this is not a good time to build a new community. And then just last year, we did a new one down by New Harmony, right off of Highway 144, off of the interstate going towards Harmony, New Harmony on the north side of the road, a new Tier 3 community called Harmony Mountain Ranch, which is a 600-acre master planned community with residential of all kinds for high density, low density, rural estate, commercial core, hotels, things like that. And they're working on getting that development plan off the ground right now in creating districts to do sewer and working with the Conservancy District to run water, all of those things that they need for a Tier 3 area. Tier 4 was everything else in the county. And the idea was Tier 4 was the rural, unincorporated, lack of services, remoteness, no urban level densities would be allowed because there were no services there. So rather than having all these random little subdivisions around the, county, we weren't going to allow those anywhere outside of a Tier 2 unless they created a new Tier 3. So the idea was to focus on annexation and to encourage that and to get the services from the municipalities, and we would not allow higher densities or small lots outside of that Tier 2 area. So that's really what we're trying to reevaluate now. 35 and 45 years later, when some of these tools came into place. Let me jump back to this slide and say in 2000 is when we adopted the subdivision ordinance that the county now operates under. And since that time, we've added a lot of different types of new zoning categories, zoning districts, new subdivision tools in ways that you can subdivide that are no longer just out in the county half-acre minimum lot sizes. We can now do 4,000 square foot lots when they're on water and sewer. We can do, if you're familiar with the parks at Deer Hollow by the Three Peaks Elementary School, that's what they call a new urbanism type with alleys in the back and smaller lots and different configurations. And we wanted to have better development than what just minimum half-acre lots could give you on a cookie-cutter basis. We wanted good design, and we wanted the ability to have tools to do that when they could get sewer and central water, and with the Conservancy District's expansion and the ability, especially in Cedar Valley, to extend sewer way north of Enoch and Cedar City, it made sense to provide tools for those kinds of developments. And it's worked well for the county, I think, and provided a lot of good, new, different types of housing options. And that's why we want to coordinate with the municipalities to say, really what makes sense in your municipality area that we can coordinate together. And so we wanted to refine some of those regulations that, or the tiers that now make more sense based on the septic tank density studies that we've done. So in 2005, there was a septic tank density study done for Cedar Valley, and it determined that for Cedar Valley, the minimum acreage for any lot on a septic would be 5 acres. And so we extrapolated that throughout the county to say that's the number we're going to use throughout the county because we don't have any other better information. In 2003, we commissioned a study with the Utah Geological Survey to study four basins and determine and study areas, one being Parowan and Paraguna, and Summit, Newcastle, and
You said 2003, you meant 2023?
I keep saying that, don't I?
Yeah.
2023.
Okay,
Yeah.
that makes a difference.
Yeah.
Just a couple years ago, and it was adopted, about a year ago. It was right at the beginning of 2024 when a lot of these rules went into place. The study was done in 2023, but a lot of the rules that came out of that study have been in place about a year now. So 2023, thank you, Dan. And that septic tank density study was a little different for each of those 4 study areas. And it took them about 18 months to do the study. And the results, and I'll go kind of flash through them here real quick, but it left us in Canaryville to say no new lots will be created on anything less than 10 acres. And that was also the case around Newcastle and around Summit. But in the in the Parowan and Paraguna area, we determined that 5 acres could still be appropriate for 2 reasons. One, there was more water available for mixing in the groundwater in Paraguna area than there was in these other areas. And because Parowan has a septic system, or excuse me, a sewer treatment system, a plant, that reduced the total number of septics that would be in that study area because they're on central sewer and they were being treated. So a lot of that density then went to the sewer treatment plant rather than being spread out across that study area. And
Meaning
so-
is, the smallest you can do lots is 5 acres and have them on septic. 5 acres per home.
And that can only occur in a tier 2. We wouldn't, still, and even though, and that was part of the confusion and part of the problem we've had all along is, all of the property around Parowan is zoned R1/2. People come in and say, oh, I wanna divide this lot into half-acre lots. And we said, well, can you tie onto the sewer? And they said, no, but I'm zoned for R1/2. We said, but we have a regulation for septic minimum of 5 acres. So they say, well, why am I zoned for R1/2? And so instead of answering that continually, we're gonna change that, okay? And it just was really confusing for a lot of people. And the zoning didn't really mean anything because the septic density study results were adopted as an overlay over that other zoning. And so regardless of what the zoning was, the minimum lot size was 5 acres around Parowan and Paraguna. And that's been the case for about a year. So we thought, well, let's take some time to do some responsible thinking and planning and coordination and see where we go from here with our tier 2 boundary, with some of the zoning as a result of some of those things. So this is just a map, for instance, of the county with the municipalities. It's not the whole county, but you can see over on the west side, Newcastle. The heavy black line is the tier 3 boundary, and you can see around Summit, there's a little black line around some of that area that's also a tier 3. The other tier 2 areas are marked or delineated on this map by the heavier rust color, kind of brownish line, the dotted, hashed line. And you can see around Parowan and Paraguna. I'll zoom in on those a little bit, but I just wanted to mention that because every municipality has a tier 2 boundary around it, these regulations that we've done apply across the county to every tier 2 area. But we want to come to each municipality and coordinate and work around that municipality with the unique characteristics of that municipality in terms of where the tier 2 boundary should be. Okay? So I'll just flip through some of this quickly because it doesn't pertain, but it's in the area, Paraguna, but let's just jump to Parowan and study that. So here is what I took off your website for what is the 2012 adopted annexation policy plan. So it's about 15 years old. It would be a good time again to look at that because not to point fingers or be critical, but the rules for policy plans are different now than they were in 2012. This window of which you've identified for your growth is way beyond what your 20-year growth window would accommodate. It's way beyond what you can provide services for.
And we have an interim growth line, which is the blue. So think of that as and then we have an ultimate growth line, which is the purple. And the purple is outside the scope of this map. But Reed's right. We know we need to. This is the next big planning document that we need to update.
And that's why we want to come here and just say, look, let's look at this together and say, how do we go forward and plan together. So this map just reflects the purple is the study area for the septic tank density and the Parowan area, and the overlaid with the current zoning and the tier 2. So the tier 2 is still the dashed line, and the heavy purple was the study area for the septic density. So if we take just a look at what the current zoning is and the tier boundary, this is what we have. The pink is R1/2. So all that property has been zoned R1/2 since 1980. And there's none of it that's been subdivided or developed in 45 years, okay, in the county. And that's because, again, like I said, when they did it originally, they just did a line around and cut through properties and didn't follow property lines, and they just kind of said, here's how we're gonna zone. And we've known for 10 or 15 years since we've been working on this stuff that we needed to do this eventually, and we finally just got there when we got the results of the septic tank study done, and we knew really where we were with septic density appropriateness. So what we're looking at here, this map, is the blue, dark blue hashed line is the county's proposed Tier 2 amendment. So it would be shrunk significantly from the previous Tier 2 boundary. And then that blue line, the light blue line, up on the north and the west side is where it differs from your annexation policy plan. So for the most part, all around the south, east, and most of the north side, it follows your annexation policy plan. But on the west and north, we've shrunk it back quite a bit than what your annexation policy plan reflects. Just thinking that, and part of the challenge in trying to do this is we wanted to follow property lines now instead of cutting through the middles of pivots and the middles of properties, where a property would either be in or out with the whole property. So all these follow property lines. And we wanted it to make be a better reflection of what maybe 20-year growth window would look like, and where the possibility of services could be obtained from the city to encourage people to annex into the city, and not develop 5-acre subdivisions just because they can do septic on 5 acres, when establishing that development pattern makes it a real challenge when you get ready to grow and annex that property in, okay? Because you're not going to change that development pattern and break out those lots down smaller and do municipal type densities. And so we felt like for the future of Parowan, it would really be better to shrink that and not provide as much land out there for somebody to just be able to come in and do a 5-acre subdivision, because that's not going to be a good development pattern as the town continues to expand.
So in the Tier 4, which is by definition, if this goes through, everything outside of the dark blue dotted line
Would be limited to 20 acres.
20 acres.
Yep.
That was what I wanted to point out.
That's the idea, that they can't break it down any smaller. And 20-acre lots then can be broke down and fit the pattern of the municipality as it grows. But when and we've seen this especially in Enoch and Cedar City, when those subdivisions develop in the unincorporated area, it is impossible to get them annexed, and so the cities go around them, and we have islands, and a lot of bad things happened over the years. By law, you can't do that anymore, you know, so it's much more of a challenge. So rather than having that line clear out there so far and giving somebody the belief that they can do a 5-acre subdivision or smaller if they get on sewer, which they could do. So you've got a sewer trunk line that runs out there, all that area that we're shrinking. And somebody could go out there and do a 1-acre or a half-acre subdivision if it were in Tier 2. And I just don't think that that's a good development pattern for the town. But that's why I wanted your input on that.
And if we allowed them to connect to sewer, which we've discussed.
Yeah,
at this
right
point
now
not.
it's a harder challenge because of the limited capacity in that system. And rather than hanging that carrot out in front of them, we just felt that it's best to shrink that back and not create that kind of a conflict right now. Because if we felt like it was, and it was the right thing, and we moved that tier boundary with an expansion of the sewer treatment plant, and maybe do a regional plant, you know, in the future, like it's Cedar City, where all of the unincorporated area, Cedar City and Enoch, are all into a common regional treatment plant. The same thing could happen here, and then we could change that Tier 2 boundary. If you look at the Tier 2 boundary in around, let me go back to the one for the county, and you can see that the municipality of Cedar and Enoch are much smaller than what that tier boundary is going around the north and west sides of those municipalities, because the sewer treatment plant runs out there, and you can see all the half acre and 1 acre and 2 acre stuff, 5 acre stuff, all out in there that are all on sewer now as a result of that regional treatment plant. And the idea that that tier boundary is big enough that those properties can subdivide down because they can get on sewer it works. And it's been a good thing. But that doesn't seem to be the best direction for Parowan from at least our perspective and what we've been evaluating. But that's why I'm here, is to get input and feel like, and see if you guys agree with that or would like to see it go a different direction. So in the tier boundary, this is what it would look like without the zoning on. It just makes it a little easier to see without all that coloring, the distance and how much property there is there between the municipal boundary, which is the black line, and the white area, and the blue line. So, and how much smaller it is now than what it was before. And this is just a side-by-side comparison, so you can see just the old and how much area there was in the new. So let me transition from that tier to say, okay, then within that tier, this is how we would look at the rezoning. Now, this slide I'm going to come back to is really not in a good order. So going to Parowan and looking at the existing zoning, the pink is 1/2 acre lots. We don't have any R1, which is a brown color in the area. The gold color is R5. The yellow is commercial, and the light blue is light industrial. We don't have any industrial property zoned currently in the tier area of Parowan or Paragouna. And so we do have some light industrial. And this is what we would envision the map looking like with the changes that we're proposing given the tier change. So what we're saying is that we would take everything that was R1/2 and R1 or R5 and light industrial, except for that one little piece. I don't know if it doesn't show up on there very well, but behind, there's one little piece right here of light blue where there are light industrial uses currently on 4 lots that are there. And we would leave those zoned light industrial, but there's no other light industrial uses along there. So we would just change all of that to R5, because that's the minimum they can be for a septic. And then in the event that sewer becomes available, or they can run a sewer line and tie in, and we have interconnection agreements with Bryan Head and Enoch and Cedar City, and you know, Dan and I have looked, we really couldn't find one, unless you did, Dan, one for Parowan. I thought we had done one back in 2006, 7, 8, but apparently it didn't ever get done for Parowan. And we would like to have one with Parowan City, an interconnection agreement that people in the unincorporated area could tie in to that sewer system. When that makes sense, and the city has the capacity or the ability for that. Because we currently have an ordinance in the county that says that when your property is within 300 feet of an existing sewer line at the available capacity, you're required to hook into it. We can't do that if we don't have an agreement that allows for that in the unincorporated area. And the ability to do that is much different than it is with water. You can easily not serve water in the unincorporated area, but there's nothing in state statute or law, and it makes a lot of sense to have the ability to tie into a central sewer system when one's available.
And just to address that really quickly, we did just pass an ordinance that we will allow no new water connections outside the city limits, because we can with some, by the state constitution,
right,
certain requirements we can, but we have decided not to.
Yeah. And most municipalities take that position.
Yeah. And we didn't address sewer. We are going to be redesigning our sewer lift station. It is Parowan owned, and Bryan Head is a partner.
Right.
They don't have ownership, but they do have, usage rights.
Yep.
And as we're gonna be relooking at that whole thing, we have some engineering we're doing right now, looking at permitting to see what kind of options the state will approve. But we definitely keep the county in mind in the conversation.
That'd be great. We'd love to be involved.
Don't know how
And
that'll
if there's
go,
a
but-
way for us to participate in that, that would be great. Sewer is a different animal, primarily because what we're trying to do is protect the groundwater. And every septic system that we can put on central sewer is a step in the right direction for protecting the groundwater. And that's why we went to significant expense and challenge and time to do these septic tank density studies, because especially in Paragouna and Canaryville and Summit and Newcastle, where you have a high concentration of septics in very small lots in an area that, we don't want to get, and Enoch has experienced some of their older wells, even though years later, they've gotten off of septic and onto central sewer, where those concentrations of septic were, continues to migrate and contaminate those wells. And they've got a couple of wells that have exceeded the EPA limit for use because of the contamination that they continue to get and increase, even though they haven't had septics there for 25 years. There were such a concentration of sewage that went into the groundwater, and that just continues to migrate. The way that the studies are done is they're just done on what's called a mass balance approach. They take the amount of sewage that are coming from the existing number of septics that are there, and they calculate the volume of that effluent and what's available in the groundwater for mixing. And they just do a mass balance approach to say, with this much groundwater mixing with sewage, how long will it take before the groundwater can be contaminated 1 milligram per liter nitrate? And that's the easiest measure that they have, and it's a reflection of sewage and contamination, and so they use nitrates to measure that. And the base level nitrates, without going into a lot of stuff on the details of the septic tank density studies, we actually projected, because Summit has a higher base level nitrate than anywhere else in the county. And if we were going to allow 1 milligram degradation of groundwater there, we felt like we could do that in other places to get to 4.5. Where the threshold for EPA is 10, and that's when you've lost your water, and then what do you do? So we don't even want to get close to that. The ultimate goal and the recommendation from the Utah Geological Survey is to work towards central sewer treatment for Canaryville and Summit and Newcastle and Paragouna, and so the county's been talking about, and we will continue to talk with the municipalities about steps to get into a program of creating a county-wide sewer district where, we can work on that. Many of you are familiar, at least even though you're not in the Central Iron County Water Conservancy District boundary, to know what they've done in Cedar Valley and the water they've developed, the wells they've drilled, the distribution lines they've put throughout to help and taken over a number of old subdivisions. That was just started in like 1998, 1995, 1998, somewhere along in there, and never really got off the ground and did much until the mid-2000s. So in the last 25 years, they've done a lot of good things for Cedar Valley and the water systems in Cedar Valley, for the municipalities as well as the unincorporated area. That's what a sewer district, countywide sewer district could do. It could be there as an organization to help evaluate when and how subdivisions and municipalities could get on a central sewer system. They can get grants, they can do studies, they can, help get some expertise in evaluating how that can happen in the future. because once your groundwater is contaminated, you don't go and clean it up. It's not a brownfield site, you know, you don't just go in and clean that up. And so we just want to take measures to make sure that that doesn't happen, and that's the direction, long-term direction. And that was a bit of a side. But in terms of just looking at Parowan and the annexation policy area that you have, the tier changes that we're proposing, and the zone changes, let me just mention what the pink, the lighter pink is around. So the map on the left, the darker pink, shows that R1/2, and that lighter pink on the right is what we would zone to RA20. So it's outside of the tier boundary, but it's still 20 acres, but we would change it to an RA20 instead of an A20. A20 is agricultural 20, and it allows lots of different kinds of uses, heavier type agricultural uses. Dairies and pig farms and gravel pits and all kinds of, you know, larger numbers of animals and all kinds of things. And that's where this slide, I kind of got out of order, comes in right here. This is just a table that shows the difference between A20 and RA20. And all of the highlighted uses, this comes out of the table of uses for the county, it's on the website. You can, all of those uses that are listed there, and all of the zones across the side, I just highlighted the ones that it changes, that we've changed from A20 to RA20. So some of them went from allowed use as a permitted, conditional, or administrative land use to being prohibited in the RA20 zone. Some of them went from a administrative land use to a conditional use. Some went from a permitted use to an administrative land use. So it just required a little more review and a little more evaluation, or it was prohibited. So that the concentration or the focus in RA20 is really residential. And the reason that we want a map that looks like this around the municipality is because we don't want to have a lot of heavy industrial, agricultural uses or business uses encroaching closer to the municipality that may not be compatible with residential until such time as that those properties are annexed as 20-acre or more properties and can follow the pattern of the municipality for development. Yes?
So currently, the people in those areas that are in Ag 20, and you want it to, or recommending it to go to RA 20.
Correct.
Is that going, are any of those properties going to be affected that they are no longer going to be permitted?
They would continue, they would be, when the change comes, if they had a use that was occurring in that property that would be prohibited by the new zone, they would be what's called a pre-existing non-conforming use. They would be grandfathered. They would be allowed to continue that use as long as it continues, and at such time as it's abandoned or vacated for a year, then it would be revert to the new zoning use. So we're not affecting anybody's current uses, just prohibiting some of those heavier impact uses from occurring in those buffer areas, if you want to look at it that way. That's how we're looking at it. We did the same thing, you know, in Paraguna. If you look at their map here, we've got, you know, some R5 around Paraguna, and their R5, their Tier 2 is expanding instead of shrinking because they basically didn't have one. It was just what the municipality was, and it's been that way since 1995. Well, because Parowan has the, I won't say mentality, the disposition to not want to annex or grow, that prohibits anybody around there from being able to split their property. And since they're not on sewer, they have septic in their area. And rather than adding more annexation and allowing them to have a higher density of septic, we would just as soon see those developed as 5-acre lots than 1-acre lots in the unincorporated area. So it's just a whole different vision of what is going on there than what's going on here. And that's why we want to tailor it to each municipality based on what's going on in that municipality, what the regulations are, what their infrastructure availability is, what their disposition towards annexation and growth and stuff is. So that's why theirs is so different. But you can see around that, we also said, let's do the RA20 as a buffer around that so that we don't have heavier impact uses in A20 encroaching any closer to the municipality, and give them time for that community to grow without having those conflict uses.
Reed, can you address around our two interchanges, in both the city zoning and in the county zoning, there's currently like commercial use,
Yeah.
and now that's gonna be switching to RA20.
I've gotta fix this map, we'd still be looking at commercial there.
There is possible
Yeah, there's
commercial use
commercial
within
there, and
if
I've
they
gotta,
don't annex.
this was a quick fix for the residential. We'll look at around the airport, you can see it up on that end, I've changed to also include some of those properties that are off the end of the runway, for a runway protection zone. But I've also gotta plug back in here some of that commercial, especially around both interchanges. There's some commercial there. The intent isn't to zone that to R5, is to keep it commercial.
Because from a residential standpoint, this essentially encourages annexation into the cities.
That's the point. That's the theory behind taking this direction.
Right. But commercial and industrial may be a slightly different animal, that's why I was asking about.
There could be some development in commercial and industrial in the unincorporated area. And that's okay, but our position in the county and all of the policies, if you read through the ordinance 205 that I put up and all of the general plan policies, it's to steer development to the cities for any kind of urban density and for infrastructure where it's needed. If they can develop something in the unincorporated area that's less impactful, they can do it on a well and a septic and it's a small business, then, then there's a bunch of property in between them and being able to annex. It's just for commercial, it's really hard for a commercial development like a hotel or something that needs a public water system to develop their own public water system and think that they can make that work on a small level. It's very, as you know, very expensive to develop public water systems and to maintain those. And so the nature of that's going to keep a lot of that kind of development from happening in the unincorporated area, because it's just cost prohibitive to try to provide central for public water systems. So it's going to be smaller type commercials that can be on a non-public water system.
So I got one more question, and we do have a lot on the agenda.
Yeah, and
But I'm not trying to
going
control
on
the
too
meeting,
long.
I'm just saying, so obviously one of the things that's fresh on our mind right now is because we are right now looking at a proposed annexation that you're familiar with, Alex Meisner's
Sure.
proposal, which is a large annexation on the east side. And we have discussed if they annex into the city, one of their advantages is that they are able to connect to city utilities and all of that stuff. And if they choose to stay in the county, or we tell them no, obviously after this, they would be limited to 5-acre lots, unless they do like a tier 3 and do their own sewer or something like that, or what?
320 acres to do that. They'd have to develop their own sewer system and their own water system.
Yep.
Public water system.
And that's what we've been,
Very expensive.
of course, communicating.
Yeah. Or beyond 5 acres.
Okay.
Yeah, they can come in and try to rezone that property if they can show, and it may not require tier 3. They could do it in tier 2 as long as they can provide sewer and water.
Yeah, and that's what we've indicated to them, that's what we've indicated to the public. And if so, then...
That's what we've represented to them as well,
Yeah.
as we've met together.
And then if that's the case, then there's different zoning options other than even half-acre, including 4K and the different other
Yeah.
zones. Okay.
Yep.
I just wanted to make sure that...
There are
everybody
development
understood.
options, and if they don't annex, they can still do high-density residential there in
Right.
the county. But it would have to be
But they gotta
on
solve
sewer,
that puzzle.
water, and, there's a number of hurdles to overcome.
So, Reed, you said 320 acres, so what if they have less?
That's to go to tier 3.
Limited to R2. The 320 is to create a tier 3
Right.
new municipality. If it's less than that, and they're in tier 2, and they can get water and sewer, they can break down and use any of the current zoning schemes that we have, like the R4K or the, performance subdivision, or, half acre or whatever. They could do that.
But they have to develop their own
Yeah,
water
they'd
and
have to,
sewers.
they would have to provide central water and central sewer. Either they contract that with the municipality, which some developments have done, but if the municipality doesn't provide, they're gonna have to build their own, create their own of some kind, which is what this New Harmony Ranch community will do. They're gonna build a sewer treatment plant for 600 lots.
Somebody's got money.
So, next steps for us, so you are aware of, you know, if you want input and further discussion, we discussed this at the February, or January Planning Commission, we'll have it again, in the February meeting, February 6th, and then it'll go to the County Commission on February 10th, and, we're going, unless we hear, you know, something to show us a different direction than what we've proposed, this is what we've come up with, and we've talked with the Planning Commission at the county about that, and we're comfortable in going that direction with fixing some of the zoning for commercial, but for the most part, it's kind of the direction we're headed. And, I'd be glad to email this to Dan, and he can share it, you can look at it, you can zoom in, you can kind of see how it fits. The idea is that it follows property lines, and we're not splitting any property with any zoning or the tier 2 boundary. And so, love to have your input, ideas, thoughts, you know, how you feel it would affect the development patterns for the city in the future, or what the county should or shouldn't be doing. So, love to have that input, and I sure appreciate your time tonight.
All right, well,
Thank
thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Reed.
Thank you.
All right, we'll move on to agenda number 5, discussion on preschool versus school versus daycare in land use code.
Okay, I'm gonna steal the, screen real quick, Kelly. Okay, we have, recently, we have somebody who is interested in doing a preschool. And so we went to look and see how it could be done, and it's within a commercial zone. And if you look at our table of uses, for permitted uses in a commercial district, what you find is preschool is not mentioned at all. You'll find that there is daycares, which daycare is a specified use, which in a commercial area is a conditional use, daycare center. And then you'll find school, but school is defined as K through 12. Of course, we know preschool is pre-K, and it is permitted. So in a commercial zone, if it's a daycare, which a preschool isn't necessarily a daycare, and this person who is wanting to relocate a preschool is specifically saying, this isn't a daycare, this is a preschool that I'm running, and can I do this in a commercial district? And I'm like, you know what, I'm not sure, because if we say it's a daycare, then you need a conditional use permit, and we could go through that process. But if we say it's a school, if we were to come in and amend this to say, you know, P through 12 or pre through K through 12 or something like that, then it would be a permitted use. In the highway service zone, which this isn't, but by the way, a school is not permitted in the highway service zone. I'm not sure about a daycare center. A daycare center is permitted. So they're kind of quite different depending on how we designate that. And
this is located in a commercial zone?
it is located in a commercial zone. Actually, the property that is being looked at is next to La Via.
In that little strip mall?
In that little strip mall, right? So I wasn't really sure how to look at it, and again, we don't have an application yet, but I said, you know what, let me take this to Planning Commission and see if the Planning Commission wants to tweak the table of uses so that we add preschool either to schools or we add it to daycares, and then we kind of know which way to go about it. A preschool is not like a rare thing, and so I'm sure maybe was an administrative decision. I don't know if what sort of other preschools are out there. I didn't look at our business permits, but anyways.
Yeah, is preschool located anywhere else? in our permits area? Can you find it anywhere else?
Anybody know? In our entire town, do we have any preschools?
Is it permitted somewhere?
Oh, no, it's never mentioned.
It's never been mentioned, okay.
It's just not mentioned at all, and I just wasn't really sure, do we lump it with daycares or do we lump it with schools? Because this person is gonna do an application, and if we lump it with schools, they do an application, then it's just gonna be permitted, right, in a commercial zone. If we lump it with daycares, they're gonna need a conditional use permit.
I would be fine lumping it with schools. I think that's the easiest to do. It's already in a commercial zone. Like, I don't see any problems with that at all.
Well, and the nature of what it is preschool. I'm not just, getting into the words, but it is more than just caring for somebody's children. It is getting them ready for school.
Well,
so I think a
typically
preschool is a little closer to a school
Yeah,
myself.
typically they're 4-year-olds, some 3-year-olds. I feel a daycare's babies, all of that
Right.
goes with it. So I would rather lump
childcare.
it in a school. That's my thoughts.
What is, I don't have kids, what's the Head Start thing? What's the age on that?
3 and 4. 4 years old is, they get first priority, and then if it's not full, they'll take 3-year-olds.
So-
At the Head Start, so is it also then maybe considered a preschool?
So it is a
or-
preschool, but it's
preschool,
like
but it's-
sponsored by SUU.
Yeah, it's sponsored through SEU, so it's technically not lumped in that.
And it's currently located by Lions Park,
Yeah,
which I don't know how it's zoned. I think it's zoned residential, 'cause we didn't go back. I think when we were talking about some of the city properties, we never have actually rezoned to their current use. And by the way, one of our goals is to relocate Head Start. We're gonna work with them to try to relocate to find a better location. That's a whole nother story,
Yes.
but this would allow us, when the day comes to relocate Head Start, to put it in a commercial zone.
It's located in R2 right now.
Generally, you wanna try and, the Head Starts like to be right next to the elementary school, to get the kids used to going to that spot, being on the same campus as possible. So we've talked about with the school district, but this is obviously a private preschool, but.
Head Start, depending on which way you consider its entrance, it could be on the historic district.
Yeah.
too.
I would say lump it in and just call it pre-K through 12.
yeah.
Yeah.
So, if that's the case, I will bring we'll have 'cause we'll need to update the land use code, or the table. I'll bring that to the next planning commission to have a public hearing, send a recommendation, we can amend the table. And in the meantime, we can tell them, in 3 or 4 weeks, you can submit an application, assuming that goes all the way through and the council approves it.
It runs in my mind that this was brought before this commission before.
It
Not on
hasn't
this
since I've been here.
specific, not on
Yeah.
this specific, site, but something as far as the zoning with the preschool.
Yeah, I haven't seen it.
Yeah, it doesn't
since I've
ring a
been here.
bell to me.
Well,
In the last
I
couple of years.
think it has,
It might be
Yeah, it might
before
be
then.
before our time.
but I can't I remember it was I'm trying to think how the outcome. I don't know, I'll have to go back and look.
Well, we'll bring it on the next agenda for a hearing and a consideration, and if there's additional information at that time, we'll share it.
Also, just to point out, 'cause I don't know if it matters so much, but daycare and school is not under our definitions at all. I don't know if that matters.
It might be a good idea while we're updating,
And
we
it
add it
takes
to
us a
definitions.
year to come up with a definition, so. We can all remember hard surface and how long that
Oh,
took.
that was so fun. I was in charge of that. All right.
'Kay.
I'll wait till the next hearing then. All right, let's move on to number 6, conditional use application for the Maverick sign.
Okay, Keith's gonna come help on that, and I do believe we have representatives from the company if we have any questions. In our sign ordinance, if you have a sign that's taller than 30 feet in a commercial area, there has to be a conditional use permit. So think KB, think TA, Maverick on the other side that's annexed in has to go through the same process, and so,
Yeah.
Keith, take it away.
And with that, just to be clear, there's no formal building permit that's been applied for, yet, so we're just working on a sign permit right now.
The building permit will be concurrent with the building.
Yeah,
And just for clarification, we're talking about the Maverick that's gonna be out by
yep,
15.
we just annexed in.
Okay.
Mhm.
As you know, it's currently zoned highway or it's overlay zoned highway service at this time. Callie, can you pull up 1550? Or Dan, pull up 1550?
I got it. I got it, yep. We toggle back and forth.
Yeah. So as you look at your table here, you see the top two. Dan always says our code is clunky. This is one of them. What business sign isn't advertising, and what advertising sign wouldn't point you towards a business? So I don't know why those are spelled out, or why there's differences in signs. And also you can see that businesses are permitted in, or business signs permitted in general commercial, but it's silent anywhere else. So,
It's just that it
I
says
think
that
for tonight-
above 30 feet is when you get into the conditional use permit
yeah.
on a business sign.
So, for this, can you go to their packet that they've submitted?
Callie, you want to, or you want me to pull it up? I can
Should be in the
I can
email.
pull it up on that email. Give me a second, Keith.
Thank you.
So this'll be on their own property,
Yeah,
and it doesn't conflict with the billboard
If it was on
code.
a different parcel than their own, now it could be in billboard territory. On their own property,
Right.
it's business.
it's advertising or business signs.
And for those Maverick representatives here, we recently have denied any new billboards. That's why that matters. Okay, let's see, Callie, and is it under the more documentation?
Probably, 'cause I submitted it late.
No, I think it's, here we go.
Yeah. So give me the next page, right there. I need a laser pointer. So you'll see off to the lower right, there's a sign 1. That'll be the main one we're talking about.
This is the sign that exceeds the 35,
Yeah.
the 30 foot.
Yeah, but it also, we have advertising limited, capped at 8 by 20, and this one, it will be, 30 feet wide as well. So, height and width, will need conditional use, and then they also have an additional sign right here, which closely mimics sign number 1, but again, it'll be a 35-foot tall sign. So it seems a little redundant, but that's what they're asking for. So again, sign number 2 here will exceed, not that we need a second use, but it needs to be addressed as well in any decision that's made. If you scroll down again, one more. Sorry. That'll be how it looks approaching from the north, and then they've provided a southbound view as well. What I think we should note here is on the southbound, you will be able to see the secondary sign that I referenced further off to the left, maybe out of frame. And then below that are the schematics and the build plans for the first sign that's 100 feet, and then that'll be sign number 2, the 35-foot.
I'm gonna put you on the spot, Keith, and I apologize for this, and you can be angry with me. Do we have any sort of comparison, maybe they are able to answer this question, with scope and size of the signs I've mentioned, TA and KB? Do you guys know? Maybe you could address that at the mic?
Yeah, TA is very close to KB.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
people online can hear.
I'm Ryan with Yesco. We're out of St. George. We actually service the TA sign. I don't know if it's exactly 100, but we have to send our 100-foot truck. It's north of 85 feet, 100. I suspect it's right at 100 based on what I'm recalling. I'm not for sure on that. KB is 50 feet to the top of it. If you go up to Beaver, for example, Eagles Landing, that's 100 feet even up to the top, just for some references.
And one thing I'll point out, but this will be involved in the building, so this is the sign permit. When Maverick gets its building permit, we'll include this in the building permit. There's gonna have to be FAA, form, whatever it is, 2056 or whatever, which is clearance for for anything above 35 feet for the airspace, 'cause we're near the airport, but
Oh, yeah,
that's doable, and
we're familiar with that, yep.
Yep.
That's it?
Yeah,
that's it.
Can,
Pretty cut and dry.
yeah.
It's not outside industry standards or what you would think is normal. It's just outside the scope of our code and requires a condition.
Within the conditional use permit space, yeah.
Mhm.
can I ask a question? Not you? Why the 2 signs?
Exactly, not to me, I don't know.
So in the sign world, there's studies about this, but, for safety, we want signs to be perpendicular to the traffic. And there's a reason for that. The sign that's off to the side, the shorter one, is intended for viewing on the surface road there, not by the interstate. It's not big enough to be legible, and so the other sign is out perpendicular, if you will. The sign on the surface street, the small one, is parallel to I-15.
When you say small, how much smaller is it?
I think it's 30 feet tall.
'Cause
But
Keith
it's
was saying it
significantly small.
was 100.
There's a, we call it high rise, which is 100 feet.
So this is why it
That's a
wouldn't
high
show up on here, because it's literally blocked by the...
Yeah, you wouldn't see it.
So this sign we're looking at right here is the 100-foot one.
That's right.
No, I know,
Okay.
I know.
Yep.
And so, this one, and Keith was saying that it maybe should have showed up in this picture, but it's gonna be
It would still be
1/3 the size
further
of
left.
that. Maybe the size of my cursor?
Yeah, maybe.
I know that's far from accurate, but...
Yeah, and 90 degrees, rotated 90 degrees from that one.
Okay. Okay.
I thought you said 100 on that one too.
No.
Okay.
Yep.
And the reason why they look similar size on here is just so you can see the content, and things like that.
That's right.
I know a lot of people are excited about the blue letters on that sign and what that means, the ethanol-free gas.
Oh.
Farmers really like that stuff to put in their small engines.
I'm fine with giving a conditional use permit for this. There's no buildings or houses in the way. It fits in with TA and KB, so I think that just goes along with what we've currently done.
My only thoughts are with them being illuminated signs and always illuminated signs, that having both of them, I'm just thinking the whole night sky thing, that's all. I'm just a little bit more cautious now, especially with lighting like that, the hotel. I don't think that was something that was discussed with the hotel, so it just makes me kind of pause to be like,
Just, maybe I can speak to that.
Mhm.
The signage that's like Maverick and whatnot the lighting is behind acrylic, it's diffused.
mhm,
It does meet typical dark sky initiative standards. The price signs actually show the LED, the light emitting diode. Those price signs have a dimmer on them that measures ambient light, and so as it gets dark, they reduce down. We can turn them up very bright and it can be obnoxious, but they are
Right.
intended to reduce down
perfect,
as it gets dark to help deal with that.
yeah, that makes me feel better.
Yeah, that's great. Shane?
I don't see any issues. I would assume we have, well, I'm not even gonna bring that up, so no.
Mhm.
All right.
That was a fat joke, Shane, I think. Sorry. They're good burritos. I've eaten a few.
All right, and this has gotta go to city council for a recommendation, or?
No,
All right.
conditional uses are planning commission.
All right, I'll entertain a motion.
I move to approve the conditional use permit for the Maverick sign as presented.
I'll second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, looks like it passed.
By the way, I'm glad, not that it passed or didn't pass, but since we only have 3, if we had a 2-to-1, it would've been kicked to the next meeting.
Oh,
'Cause right now, it takes 3 votes to change it, to approve something. We may change that.
it does. All right, let's move right along to number 7, storage container code discussion.
Thanks,
All right.
guys.
Thank you.
So, thank you so much.
'Kay.
Okay, I have my paper that Larry did such an awesome job with. Do you have yours?
Yep.
Awesome, I gave Shane one.
I
Do
don't have one.
you want me to give you one? I have an extra one here, David. It's from a little while ago. Larry typed it up, so I wanna
So
appreciate.
Jamie, I
Oh,
prepared a list of things that we had resolved based on the
Perfect.
minutes,
Mhm.
and then a few things that were still unresolved, but you're the chair, you tell me how you wanna go
No,
about it.
let's go ahead, let's hear that.
And if people
Perfect.
remember this differently, I took this off of the minutes because my own memory is not that great. And so, let me just go through these. So, the way I could read it off the minutes and using my own memory, these were the things that I think that were resolved. And we're ready to kinda come forward with some language. Containers as dwellings, the answer was no, because they were too small for a tiny home type concept.
Mm-mm.
But, and tell me if I'm wrong, and my thought was is we were gonna readdress that if and when tiny homes were possible.
Yeah.
I think that's, yes, that was,
Which is different than building materials.
Mhm.
yes,
Yes.
Okay.
yes.
That's what it said in the minutes, but I've added my own language to say,
Yeah.
this
no, that's
obviously
covered.
changes if we allow tiny homes.
Which we have not even crossed that bridge.
No,
Yeah.
but we need to bring it up, just because of the difference in what it says in the different residential zones
Mhm.
on housing size, right?
Yep.
So that's coming, but just 'cause we gotta clarify it, and if not, to finish having our conversation about tiny homes.
'Kay.
So building materials, this is what it came off of, what we said is, it is allowed in building materials as long as it meets the International Residential Building Code, and it is not visible from the exterior, was the notes that we said.
Yep.
We said, yeah, you can include it in, but we don't wanna have houses built out of these things, and it's clearly just a stack of storage containers.
Mhm.
And we're getting a little edgy, a little close to the edge on what we can say, the look and feel, but we, and Scott was here when we debated this, we're saying you can't build a house out of them is different than saying the aesthetics.
Mhm.
It's saying the construction thereof.
Yep.
So, we're gonna try and see how that flies. I'm gonna have Scott look at it again. It's different in the historical preservation zone, but outside of that, we can't say, look, the aesthetics of a home, but but this is the way we left it, is yes as building materials as long as it's not visible.
On this, I just also think that we need to double check that if we're going to at this time say that you can't use them as a dwelling, but then you also say they can be used as building materials as long as they meet the building IRC code.
So, my thought was
IRC has Appendix Q.
okay,
So I would just, 'cause Appendix Q would permit, a container to be used,
well, the only thing
one container to be used as a dwelling unit.
the only thing that would disallow it to be used as a building unit right now, and maybe we just write it in that way if we do tiny homes, we don't have to come back and address storage container stuff, is just that, right now, the only thing that limits it is the size,
Mhm.
a single container.
Right.
Is what is it,
I just am
400?
trying to think,
It's 1,000 square
Or is it
feet in the
1,000?
one zone that is clear, and then in our PUD code, you're able to go lower than 1,000 square feet in R1 to 750 square feet. But that's the only other place where it really talks about shortening that. But some of our residential codes are kind of, don't say anything about limit on size, like R2 and R3. They are addressed in sizing down for PUDs, but it's kind of, you have to fill in the blank, and we've always administratively said 1,000 square feet, so. The exception to that is, we just passed new external dwelling unit code, and external dwelling unit, so think mother-in-law apartment, cannot be smaller than, it cannot be bigger than 1/2 the size of the main house. And we said in there, 400, it couldn't be smaller than 476, because that's what enters into this tiny home.
Mhm.
And these are smaller than 476.
Mm.
So sizing is all that would keep you from turning it into a dwelling as of now.
Okay.
So I'll double check with Appendix Q.
Perfect.
Lot size requirements, there was a lot of conversation on this, and pretty much the consensus on these next two things was, we're just gonna let the 25% rear yard govern lot size. We're gonna throw out the 10,000, what was it, 700 and something square foot lot, we're throwing that language out, we're throwing out the language about 40-foot containers or not, 'cause what we're gonna say is 25% rule is what reigns supreme. You gotta keep your backyard 75% open.
Yeah.
Stacking of containers, if it's within the structure of building materials, it's okay, but, several of the members said they didn't feel comfortable with it if they were just using it as storage.
Mhm. Correct.
So that everybody remembers it that way.
Mhm.
Siding requirement was pretty sound, remove the siding requirement, but still require the paint. And another place which we didn't even talk about, but it's assumed, we're also gonna say you can't have them, if they have you know, somebody's tagged it with gang signs or something, you gotta paint it.
Yeah.
You can't leave it looking industrial with whatever the logo of the shipping company it came on. You have to paint these things, right? Relocating, grandfathered container, what we said was, if a 40% is allowed on that lot because of the sizing and all that other, the 25%, then we're okay with you moving it around on the lot. That's the way the minutes read, and that's the way I remembered it.
As long as it's behind the primary structure, right? We're gonna maintain that?
That's part of
That's
this,
the next
that's the next
section.
thing down here, which
We didn't decide.
we didn't decide. But, so is everybody good with that?
Yeah, the only thing is on the required paint, I think we decided we wanted it like a neutral color,
Neutral or
Neutral or
complementary with
with the
what,
house.
yeah.
you know, to match the house.
I think that's already in there,
It was in code, but, yeah.
yeah.
Well, in the code, it said it had to be sided, actually.
Well, I know, but it
Yeah, but
said
then it
something
said
about
something about- yeah.
neutral colors or something, yeah.
Mhm.
So that brings us to the yard discussion. Front yard, side yard, rear yard only. Then if you're gonna go down that road, you've gotta deal with corner lots, which effectively kinda have two front yards. And is it okay if it's, because a lot of corner lots, you know, they have their front yard, but their side yard is effectively, from a setback perspective, another front yard. But could you put a container there? So, we didn't really define that I could see, and I couldn't remember.
Hi,
Sure,
Weston. I don't wanna see them in front yard.
I agree strongly.
Yeah,
Mhm.
definitely not that. Side yards, I kinda wonder, there are some houses that are set so far back that their backyard is kinda their side yard. I don't know how you can kinda go around that. Up for ideas.
So we're trying to finish the storage container, the things that we hadn't yet decided. We're just working through that to be finished with that.
Your discussion, not front. Definitely not front.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I definitely don't want it in the front, but side
Yeah.
yards, like,
I'm picturing like, Go.
So, would side yard be anything that's not directly in back of the house, or just anything that's
Yeah.
not behind the house?
yeah, that's what I was wondering too.
On the way it's figured, on a normal lot, if we wanna call any lots normal, in the middle of a block, the side yard is from where the front of the house, the corner of the front of the house, to the corner of the back of the house, out to the property line.
is the front yard? Sorry, say that again?
So,
If this is the house, then you're talking,
if this is a house on a lot,
Lot.
this is the side yard,
Mhm.
and this is the side yard, this is the front yard, this is the backyard, right? Backyard,
okay.
side yard,
Mm,
front yard.
okay, so
The problem
backyard,
is when
side
this
of the
is a
houses.
corner lot,
So,
that side yard now has setbacks same as the front yard.
Mhm,
Yes,
yep.
so this is side yard.
Did you see that?
And you know we have some kind of non-standard lots. Not every lot is square. Some lots are L-shaped. Some lots are like, what the heck is the side yard? Gets kinda hard to figure it out on some. The standard lot is pretty normal, and that's the way it's explained.
I would like to say no on side yards, but if they wanted to come in maybe for a conditional, if it was a weird, awkward shape, or there was more side yard or something like that.
'Cause I'm
Be one way to
picturing
do
like,
it, yeah.
Yeah, that's.
because we've looked at, Lizzie's, the inn, the bed and breakfast.
Yep.
And saying no to a side yard, okay, yeah, when you're looking at the front house, it being a corner lot, I don't know if we permit one on looking at the house on the left side,
You would probably go,
but on the right side, you could.
you'd go off whatever the address is, 'cause that would be the front of the house, right?
Yeah,
And that's usually what we try and do.
That corner lot.
but it's a corner lot, and so, yeah, you know, and that's.
Side yards can get tricky.
Right.
Keith, when we start talking
Yeah.
fence permits, man, sometimes it wraps your mind in
Well,
fret.
Well, maybe in the case of corner lots, you could just say not against the street.
Yeah, or not within the setback required from the public right of way.
There you go.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
That sounded like some legal words there that just came out of your mouth.
So the two things I heard was conditional use permit on side yard
Yeah.
or stay out, well, they have to stay out of this, maybe they don't. So what do you think, conditional use permit or setback requirements?
I'd say conditional, 'cause then you can do it case by case.
Yeah. I'm fine with either.
And then backyard setbacks and percentage.
That was one thing that, I remember one of the council members really strongly talking about, and we didn't talk about, was whether or not the setbacks pertained. If you set a storage unit down, it's kind of by definition temporary. We do not require them to have a foundation. Therefore, if you put it on the setback, it's not the end of the world, 'cause it can be moved. Do we want to allow it within the setbacks, or say setback restrictions apply? Because that's what we were talking about with rear yard. In fact, that needs its own thing.
I kinda think on the back property line, it really wouldn't matter if it was up to it, would it?
In the existing code right now, it says in the backyard, they have to stay 8 feet away from the fence.
With the permanent.
No, a storage container,
Oh.
just the current rules. And setbacks in the rear yard, once you get 10 feet behind the house, you can go up to 2 feet from the side is the setback. So, that effectively, think of it that way, effectively the setbacks for a accessory dwelling, or an accessory building is 2 feet in the backyard.
I like the setback.
Other than if there's a easement, like a public utility easement, we still won't
Yeah.
let them build on that.
I like that 2 feet one, just because if you're a neighbor and,
It's probably a good idea.
yeah, you don't wanna argue with your neighbor if it's on the line or not, or what.
And it's probably good to have
Absolutely,
2 feet so they could paint it
Yeah,
when
paint
it
it and
needs
maintain it.
maintenance.
Absolutely,
Okay.
Consistent with the accessory
yeah.
structure.
Same as rear yard then.
So, just to clarify, when we've been talking about the 25% rule, does are we changing something that it's making the quote-unquote yard space larger now? That they could,
No, 'cause
Okay.
the yard space is the total yard space.
Okay.
We ignore the setbacks when we calculate that. The whole point of the 25% rule, I believe, is for fire safety. You get too many buildings too close together, then you don't have enough fire separation. I think that that's the case, but I don't know that. So therefore, we don't care about setbacks from a fire perspective, we just need enough open space.
Okay.
Okay, permit required.
How much work is it from city employees to have a permit pulled? Is it like time consuming?
No, they just have to, the thing that a permit does is it allows somebody to understand the regulation. If you don't have a permit, people slap them down. People slap them down anyways,
Yeah.
but at least if you have a permit required. So it's work. I'm not gonna say it's not work. And then, of course, if a permit's required, what happens when they didn't get a permit and did it, you know?
Mhm.
You can go back and say, well, you can get a permit after the fact, and we'll get down into the penalties, because right now the penalties are extremely high.
Is there a permit required for a shed?
There's a building
No.
permit required for an accessory building bigger than 200 square feet. And in this case, there's no need to have a building permit from an IRC standpoint to just put one unit in, right? 'Cause it's just a self-contained deal. It doesn't need footings, it doesn't need, I know if you're gonna install electrical, obviously you need a building permit to have a certified electrician do it and stuff like that. But just to plop one in, we don't need a building permit for the sake of a building permit. It would just be to actually ensure that they followed our
To follow the rules and make sure
the
it's
rules.
painted and it's
Right.
that. Then I would stick with the permit still.
Yeah, if it doesn't
I like
make it
permit.
easier to enforce.
Yeah, if it's not like super time consuming and all of that, so.
It's a pain, but that's why we're here to serve, right? Keith?
If it's more work for Keith, then I say yes.
Absolutely, I second.
I love it.
You are welcome.
Okay, historic district, by the way it's currently written is, it is not allowed unless you have written permission from the Historic Preservation Committee and the city council. That's the way it's currently written. We can say that it is allowed, just follows the other. We could say that it has to have historic preservation, approval. And I know how the Historic Preservation District would feel. They would want to make sure that they're gonna approve look and feel. You start slapping, these down and you're gonna change the look and feel historical district. My thought was city council approval on top of historical preservation. You're kind of like,
Mhm.
do you trust your historical preservation district or don't you by having
Yeah.
that in there? But that's the way it's written.
I would think just the historical
committee.
yeah, the committee, 'cause they're gonna have their opinion, and I think that they would feel that their opinion should trump city council.
Yeah.
I wouldn't use the word,
Set up if someone goes for signage, they're the ones who approve it, it doesn't have to come to city council after? Can't they approve signage in the historic district, or does it have to go historic?
they just have
And
to
then to
get
city
a
council.
sign permit.
Okay, 'cause I know I've heard of them approving signage.
Yeah,
And then I don't remember it coming to city council also.
But it doesn't negate the sign permit, but they can permit a sign.
Yeah, I think that it
You
has
have to get a sign approved.
your signs still have to comply with city ordinances, but yes, in the historic, 'cause I had to get my signs approved.
'Cause there's additional requirements on signs that they have a certain look and feel.
Yeah, and so I'd have my signs approved when I moved over behind the laundromat.
So what I'm asking, what I'm
I know,
asking
everything's really loud
is
today.
is it the same process that they need to get approval from historic district, like for your sign, for instance, and then does it also then have to come to city council for approval?
Well, that's what we're saying. It used to say that, which we're thinking about saying just historical preservation.
'Cause it would be good if it was the same.
Yeah.
Historic preservation, not historical.
You have typed,
Historic.
yep, there you go.
But I think it defaults to the ordinance,
Yeah, it does.
regardless.
It does.
Yeah.
So really,
Yeah, it's still
It's-
administrative in nature.
Mhm.
right.
I wanna
Yeah.
repeat that really bad, but
I know, I do.
I don't want a historic preservation committee chairperson's husband to come up and punch me in the nose. So, this is one conversation that we danced around, but we never decided. In different zones, we talked about being looser or tighter. In industrial zone, which, do we care as much about regulating these things as we do in a residential zone? And same thing with commercial zones. So I threw in here some things that, you just throw it out if you don't want, but I said in here, in industrial zone, no restriction other than those mentioned above. And I'm thinking in terms of quantity. We never talked about a total quantity number other than the 25%, but it wasn't in the context of quantity.
Mhm.
Right.
Commercial zone, same thing. Residential, do we wanna limit the number of restriction? And I said if used as storage, because if you're building it into a building, we don't care if it's
Yeah.
2 or 3 or 4, you already said you can't see it. You can't, that's one of our requirements. So if I'm building a barn dominium and I gotta use 4 of these things, 2 on top of each other, we really don't care. But if you're using it for storage and they're gonna be standalones, maybe we do care about the total
Well,
number.
Couldn't we just go off the 25% off that one right there?
Totally could, yep.
I think that just makes sense. If you have lots of acreage, then, I
So
mean,
we
that's
could
my,
say
that's my
twenty-five
thought.
percent. Highway services, one of the things about highway services, I'm gonna quote Parowan City Honorable Mayor, these are the bookends of our city, these are the entrances to the city. We do have a lot of storage on the one end of town, by the way, this isn't a dig at, our commission member, because he is in a commercial zone. But in the historic area, in the highway service area along 200, we have a bunch of storage. It wouldn't be permitted now under the zoning, but they were there prior to the zoning of highway service. Do we wanna have any limit on storage containers in the highway service zone? 'Cause we do not allow storage units in highway service. But I don't know.
I definitely think we need to have a limit on commercial and highway services.
And the reason I'm harping so much on it is because a lot of storage business models nowadays is they literally just stack these things side by side, put up a sign and say rat proof, mouse proof, moisture proof.
Yeah.
So we need to be consistent whether we're gonna allow storage or not in highway services.
Well, and you have to look where our commercial zones are too, they're backed up to residential. If I'm living next to a commercial place, I don't wanna see 20 storage units in one little area, or in highway services.
And
Industrial,
commercial doesn't
not so
have
much.
rear yard concept. Their setbacks are zero when they are right up against another commercial. So there's 25% of the rear yard, there's usually not a rear yard in commercial, it's just a whole different animal, which is why I think you have to consider these 4 zones totally different.
Yeah.
So let's go one by one. Industrial.
I'd say no restrictions.
Yeah.
They have so many purposes for industrial
Yeah.
that
I guess most of the things listed above. So let's just say no restrictions to quantity.
Larry was concerned about that, place down at the Hamilton Ford exit. He says it's really chaotic looking, it's got containers just every which way.
Yeah, it does.
Could you put in there, that it has to be in an orderly fashion or something?
Yeah, it's just not like,
You could do a conditional use permit. Of course, it's hard to that's a hard
yeah,
conditional use to
that's
put on
hard
though,
to be
legally.
enforced.
So maybe that can of worms not worth opening up.
Might not be.
Because that would still limit it from the stacking that we had above, right?
Yeah, stacking, it would limit it, because it would say not if the primary purpose is for storage, and that would apply to all zones.
Yeah, so,
Well,
This is
You
a
just-
quantity.
Industrial
Oh,
zones, do we
quantity.
care if
This
they
is-
stack too high?
I think you'd wanna keep it from going
Keep
too
them from,
high.
yeah, that's what I was saying, yeah.
I think the reason we talked about stacking them is a stability issue, are they gonna tip over and all that
Yeah,
stuff?
let's just stick no stacking. Sorry. Changed my mind.
Okay, so commercial zone.
I definitely think there needs to be a restriction there. To how many? What are you guys thinking? Or are you thinking a restriction?
1,
Let's talk about my storage business for a minute.
So, just acknowledge the conflict of interest, and then you can talk about it, just so people understand.
Okay, I declare my conflict of interest being in the self-storage business. So what would 25% mean for that?
25, you wouldn't say rear setback, you'd have to define it differently, like
Yeah.
over the entirety of the lot.
I mean, I wouldn't wanna fill my yard full of containers, but it would be nice to be able to offer some.
So where his business is like a storage facility, it makes sense to allow him to have more because that's his,
And you can have a
That is
storage
his-
facility in commercial.
yeah, and that's his,
Something that we would
his
do under
business. But if we're talking about like,
for this
We could do conditional, but, so think of it in the terms of when a conditional use permit happens. They come in and they say, I want to do this, and we say, okay, what are, valid negative impacts of allowing this use? And it's like traffic, noise, light, sound, well, noise and sound are the same thing. Those are like types of things that we can say is a negative impact on neighbors or the public, right? And then you can put conditions to mitigate those things. I don't know if you could say a negative impact is you have too many, but maybe what you could say is a negative impact is you have, you know, fire, but these things aren't really a fire problem.
No.
So, I think if you're going to regulate a density of these things, you should do it in terms of trying to regulate a density. No more than half of the total acreage, or no more than 65% of the total acreage. So if you you probably know this better than others, if you optimize a storage lot, and you're gonna have to have roads and all of that stuff, what does an optimized storage lot look like in terms of storage units on a property? 60, 70%, or?
You know, I've never done the numbers, so couldn't really say. We have a lot of outdoor parking. So,
Right, 'cause you have outdoor storage for RVs and boats.
yeah.
I mean, I was thinking that when we were looking at this, it's, a business in a commercial zone wants to have a storage unit.
That's mostly what you'd think, yeah.
I wasn't thinking of it as a storage business.
Right. Lots of businesses do have containers too for overflow and inventory, whatever.
Yeah,
Right.
they do.
Yep.
And that's where I was looking at it as more of a general commercial business,
Not a storage.
not a storage business, not a
Mhm.
storage, yeah, as to
But somehow you have to address
limiting
both,
the
right?
quantity.
How do you address both?
Yeah,
All I can think of is conditional, but
Well, how do we control, right now a storage company is permitted in general commercial, correct?
Yeah, and we just look at their plan, and we're gonna look at things like fire, ingress, egress, to get in and out. We're gonna look at things like,
actually it's only permitted right now under conditional.
in commercial, it's a conditional use.
Oh, then that makes it, that was gonna be my suggestion, it makes it a little.
Maybe that's
Yeah.
fine, and
Mhm.
we just look at their plan and we say, your plan doesn't work from a traffic flow standpoint, or your plan doesn't work from a,
or just allow them to have like 2 commercial containers, and any more, they need to come with a conditional use. And hopefully that will take off some of the applicants. I mean, I can't see most businesses needing more than
No.
like 2 or 3 in Parowan.
well, but if you already require conditional use, well, okay, so if you did this, then a non-storage business would need a conditional use for more than 2,
Yeah,
in what you just said.
and then if you're in the storage business, you can come for a conditional use, or however many you guys are comfortable with.
You can have your 2 and then come for it.
And then come for more.
Yeah.
And then hopefully that takes away some of the conditional use permits you would get.
And then this would also require them to be behind the business, like the rules that we have set, 'cause I'm thinking of like
Yeah,
the Rambouillet barn, and we don't wanna see shipping containers next to,
mhm.
and then you also have historic
Yeah, historic has its
evidence
own
that
protection.
too, but,
Yeah,
But it could happen right behind the Rambouillet barn.
right,
yeah.
right.
Actually, that's residential, but.
I was just making sure that we're thinking that then they'll still have to,
So the example would be like right behind, I was gonna say Tinks. There are a few places so the commercial zone goes all the way from Main Street to 100
Like-
East.
Right behind
Right behind the city offices is one, and right behind Tinks is one. You know what I mean? If you wanted to do something right behind that, it's still commercial.
So right behind my house is commercial. I mean, from my backyard to 200, that's all zone commercial. Even where all that orchard is and everything, that's all
Mhm.
zone commercial.
right.
So, yeah,
I'm just trying to picture,
across the street from you is zone commercial.
like Biasi, would they have to have one behind the business, or could it be on the sides? Like, that's what I'm trying to,
I think we're talking about behind, aren't we?
Yeah, behind.
we are, okay, that's what
Yeah.
I would prefer, I'm just
It would
making
be
sure.
kinda like the
that-
house thing, no side yard.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
That just got me thinking on setbacks. We need to, so in that case where you have commercial, and it says, we had it as same as rear yard, but in a commercial zone, the rear yard is 0. Actually, no, when it abuts a commercial, the rear yard setback changes, so, never mind, it's good, same as rear yard is good.
Okay.
That way you couldn't have somebody slap a commercial, a storage container right
Right.
on your property line. This prevents that because the setback
Okay.
itself is modified.
Awesome.
Okay, so we're good there still. So 2, you like 2?
I do.
Okay, when used as storage, not building material.
Yep.
Okay, residential zones, we just changed that to 25% to be consistent with our other 25% rule
Mhm.
on spacing in the back. Highway services,
I
none?
would
1?
one or the same as the commercial with
Yeah, conditional use permit.
being if they're gonna have more than 2, they're gonna need a permit.
And that would allow
I mean, I'm
somebody
even
to-
fine with 1, but I'm just saying, I wouldn't go crazier than that.
that allows somebody to have some usage.
Yeah.
I mean, quite often you have a business that's located there and they wanna put one in the backyard for, like Weston said, for inventory and
Well,
stuff
Sweet
like
Pea
that.
Farm and Orchard, they have one,
Yeah.
Mhm.
and they paid it, and it looks fine.
Yeah. The paint makes a big difference.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
So with,
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
so with that, with, the church, are they highway services?
They are highway services, but this would be included in their building material, so it wouldn't, because they wanna do 2 on one side and build an extension and 2 on the other side and build an extension. But it would be within the use of their building materials, so it wouldn't apply.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
So I said change to temporary storage. You probably wonder what I'm talking about. Oh, wait.
Use of temporary, oh, there.
Yeah, so temporary for construction, this, I think we can probably literally wipe this out if we're going to relax some of the requirements, 'cause this basically was a way to relax the 120-footer and give them a little bit of wiggle room on a temporary basis. If we're gonna give them more wiggle room anyways, we can probably just wipe this part out.
Yeah, if it's temporary.
Does that make sense?
Wouldn't you need to keep temporary, like if there's a construction project going and it needs to be out front?
Well, you could say
Yeah.
during construction,
Do we already have that covered?
no,
No?
The only thing is how long is temporary? 'Cause I can build a
Maybe
house
it's
for 3
defined.
years.
It's
Is it
Maybe
defined in there?
not to exceed 1 year.
But if we take that out,
1 year, and then you can, then the zoning administrator can grant a 6-month extension.
Or would you go just as long as the building permit's open?
yeah, you can do that.
Or I don't.
I think there needs to be something there, so temporary is not 5
Permanent?
years.
Yeah.
Yeah, 'cause I'm still building temporary.
Colorado City,
Mhm.
permanently incomplete construction.
But see, we're going to, like, we don't leave them open indefinitely. If they're not doing any building for a while, we will go back to them and say, okay, your building permit's gonna expire. And we're not, like, crazy about it, but if it's been sitting there for 4 years and they're not, you know, what's the saying I'm not gonna use 'cause it's not very nice, you gotta crap or get off the pot. We'll tell people, hey, your building permit's still open and you're not doing anything, do you want it to stay open or we need to close it if it's been multiple years with nothing. Okay, secondary use only. Right now, in the current code, it says that you can only have one if you already have the primary building on the lot.
I think you can have it
Yeah.
as long as you're following the above
Yeah.
rules.
So we can just strike this.
Then how do we define,
How do you find front yard, rear yard?
I think I disagree.
Yeah,
Yeah, so explore it.
I think you need to have an active building permit or a primary structure to have one.
yeah.
So what if somebody has an empty lot
How about that empty lot that,
and you're kind of farming it? you know, or you got a garden on it, which, I mean, people will own the lot next to their house,
Yeah,
and they'll kinda combine them, put a fence around both of them, it's still a separate lot. I mean, I'm just trying to think of scenarios
Yeah.
that people would be like, this is reasonable, or, you know, there was somebody who was out across from Sky Ranch, is it Sky Ranch, Skyview? Maybe just,
Sky Ranch.
and they had like they had a couple sheds and like like a cow they milked and some chickens and stuff like that, you know.
We could just say it's gotta be at the rear of the lot, and, you could limit it to one, since you don't have a 25% situation.
Yeah.
The rear 50% of the lot, and other than that, it conforms to the other?
Yeah,
Yeah, there you go. Or the rear 20% or whatever.
yeah, the real, whatever.
I
Jane,
didn't hear that.
That way somebody
put it in the
doesn't-
back of the lot,
Put in the back.
some percentage of that. Shane, what are your thoughts? You were the one that was like, I don't like this.
Well, I
If
mean,
there's a few acres, that could be clear back.
That's why I say percentage,
Yeah.
rather than so many feet off the rear property line.
Well, if there's acreage,
Even
then
better
it's
if
not
it's
an
clear back.
eyesore so much.
Yeah, it's better if it's clear back.
Whereas if it's like the gentleman who can't do anything with the lot, that old man who, has less than 10,000 square feet next to, on 200 South.
Oh, yeah.
And so he was thinking about doing some townhomes and that whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
He could put one there, but him having it close to the road would be more of an eyesore than if it was back on the back 50 or the back 20%. If it's on acreage, I don't think it's as much of a concern visually.
So you could say up to an acre, it's gotta be within the rear 20 feet of the, or whatever. More than that, it could be in the back half or something like that, I don't know.
I just think we leave it just the rear of the lot, the 20%. Even if you have 10 acres, it's gotta be in the back of that lot.
You probably wanna put a limit on the quantity, right?
One.
So you can't just stack
Yeah,
your,
like,
They
just
can
stack a whole
offload.
bunch.
yeah.
do we have residential that's multiple acres?
Yeah. We have residential, we actually have a lot of what's called A1, which is technically agriculture one, but when you wanna do anything, most of the land use is similar to R1. And we have a fair amount of undeveloped land on the, kind of on the south and between Old Highway 91 and Holyoke.
Mhm.
There's stuff that's inside the city that's all zoned A1, and there's some bigger acre, like, there's some 1 to 5 acre lots all out in their parcels, not lots, parcels.
I have 1 acre right across the street from me, it's zoned A1.
Do you think one's too restrictive? Should it be one per acre?
My thoughts are more around R1. Like, I don't like the idea of just random secondary structures on a R1 lot. Like my neighbor in my subdivision had, that'd drive me nuts, without a house.
So what would you propose?
I don't know.
And we don't have to come to consensus, but I need to write it up one way, or write it up with 2 variants, so then when it comes back, you can vote by motion and see who wins the day when it comes to vote, you know, all that stuff. But if we can come to a consensus, it's even better.
Assuming as of right now, you can build a shed, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so we've talked a lot about this. People wanna build a garage and then come back later and build a house. We discussed it internally a lot, we've discussed it in planning commission once or twice, and what we decided was, as long as you leave space for the primary structure, dwelling to be built, we'll let you build the accessory building first. And if you put a residence in the accessory building, if you build a shop and have residential use in it, it now becomes a primary building. And then now you're looking at a EADU in front of the house, so we try to discourage that from happening. But if somebody wants to build a shop, it's come up several times. I bought a piece of property, I'm gonna build my house there someday, but for now I just wanna build a garage. I wanna be able to park my boat, park my stuff, go there and work on something. Eventually, I'm gonna build a house. We say, great, build it where you would build an accessory dwelling unit, and later you can come back and add a house. This is somewhat similar to that conversation. And that's why if you say within a certain percentage of the lot, you're restricting it to where accessory dwelling units would go, more or less.
Yeah.
But you don't have a house there to block a bunch of them, and you don't have a 25% ability to calculate that, so it gets tricky. Which is why maybe you'd limit to a number of them for now.
Yeah, I don't think it should be more than one if we permit them.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think I can go along with this as long as no one's putting a storage container on a residential lot within what the front setback would be for a home.
Yeah, it definitely have to be in the back and then match all the requirements about with the painting and everything.
I mean,
And I think in your subdivision, there's CCNRs that will probably ban that.
And that just kinda goes along with what we said for residential too, so
yeah, but they don't.
being pretty consistent.
So they don't enforce them. Sorry, Weston, what was that?
Oh, I was just saying that's kinda going along with what we already said on residential.
Yeah.
It's being pretty consistent.
Yeah, I'm fine with it as long as it's the
Keep
very
it
back,
to the
it's,
back.
yeah, limited to one, still has to do the paint, the maintenance, upkeep. Is there something in there about maintenance and upkeep?
Not that I remember. I do think you gotta keep it painted.
Yeah,
If not, we'll make sure that you do need to keep it painted.
yeah,
We could say on require paint and maintenance of paint. 'Cause you could throw some temporary stuff on that washes off and that looks
Yeah.
like crap, or fades out.
or they just painted it once and they're good.
Yeah. 'Kay, so there's a weird thing in there that says that you can't put refuse or debris inside a container. My thought is for one, what's the purpose? There's a totally different section that says you can't store hazardous materials. How do you define refuse or debris? And do we care, and can you enforce it? I can't go, I mean, there's a thing called a Bill of Rights, right? We can't go in and say,
Show me the inside.
show me the inside of that container unless there's like probable cause of a crime being committed or
Yeah.
something like that.
And you have to show up with a warrant, don't you?
You show up with a warrant, or unless there's, say, suspect, it's imminent danger of a person or whatever, that's a law enforcement thing. I'm saying this is a weird section to have in there. We already say you can't store hazardous materials, which, think of things like something that's explosive or
Yeah.
something like that. And again, how are we gonna really dig into that?
Yeah,
But what's the purpose of refuse or debris? And somebody's debris is somebody else's treasures. This whole thing makes me a little bit,
Wouldn't we rather have it inside there than,
then
I would
outside.
rather have it
Me too.
inside there than out in the
too.
yard, yeah.
Go see it. Yeah,
Somebody may get one of these to clean up and organize their barnwood. There was this famous case recently that came up, and somebody flew a drone over a lot to get pictures of all the barnwood to try to say, look at all the debris. Well, I mean, barnwood is like gold to some people, and anyways, that's what I'm saying. You kinda get into some slippery territory there.
yeah, I'm fine with taking that out. I don't know about you guys.
Okay. Are you guys okay with removing that?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, we'll remove, hazardous materials, we'll leave in where it is. Enforcement. To break this thing currently is
That's
a
pretty
Class
harsh.
B misdemeanor. That's the same thing as theft, DUI, assault, et cetera. I talked to the chief about this, and he is just blown away that that's what was put in here. He's like, I recommend an infraction. An infraction is something that is a land use thing that the city can work through with the owner if they're not compliant. We're not gonna throw them in jail the same as we would with a DUI if they didn't get a permit.
Can you please step up
Could
to
you
the
please
mic
step up
and
to the
let us,
microphone?
let us know, court, what
Put on
you
your
think?
court hat.
I would echo Chief's sentiments. I was simply making a joke in terms of fine revenue. The difference between a Class B misdemeanor infraction is substantial, so.
Just how heavy-handed do we wanna be here?
We could change the name to Iron Fist Town.
I would go off the recommendations of the chief.
So he recommended infraction rather than a Class B. Is there anybody that disagrees? Oh, and it goes on your criminal record for the rest of your life, by the way.
Dang you,
Actually, your
storage
ability to get a
container.
job because you are a
You didn't get a permit.
old-faced criminal walking the streets.
If you're not a criminal, we'll make one out of you.
So, anything else? We kind of reviewed it once. I did a cursory review again and came up with these things that I could see. I think we're ready to go to a public hearing, and it can come back and we can tweak things if we want after that. Or you guys want a chance to look at it again one more time before we schedule a public hearing? I need to actually write it up in the, how it would affect the language, redlining and all that stuff. And I can do that for the next meeting, or I can do it by Friday and publish it, and then we can have the public hearing on that. What do you guys wanna do?
I mean, is there really a push, is there a push to get
The only push is the church that really wants to do their food pantry.
I'd say just get it done.
Yeah, I'd say let's do public hearing and get it done.
Because as long as you're not massively deviating from what was noticed, you can make small tweaks even after the public hearing.
Yeah,
You just haven't been fair to the public if you make a major change after the hearing, right? But I think we've discussed most of the critical things that the public may have strong opinions.
Dan, just remember the first one.
I know.
What's the first one? Where are we looking?
No, this is a historical thing that gets,
Oh, he means the first round on the containers in the past?
Yep.
Okay.
Because what Dave's saying, and it actually was due to a public hearing, there was a public hearing on a certain presented code, then it went to city council, and they made major changes and adopted it without a second public hearing.
wow.
And that has stuck in
That was on container?
on the containers.
Mhm.
That's how the code we have was, and some people, you know how divisive it is? There wasn't a good public hearing after major changes, so if we're gonna make major changes, we'll have a second public hearing, right?
Yeah.
That's the whole point of a public hearing. You let the public know what you're considering, so. Okay, that's all I have that was just what I had, so.
Anything else from you guys?
Nope.
All right, so then you'll get that for public hearing ready, right?
Yep, I'll get it ready, I'll get it out Friday afternoon. I'll send it to everybody, and we'll make it available to the public to review. And then we'll,
So you're scheduling the public hearing for the next planning and zoning regular meeting?
Okay. Do I need to have a motion on that, or are we just good to go?
yeah, motion would be great.
All right, guys.
So we need to make a motion
Just
to have a
schedule the
public
public
hearing?
hearing, yeah.
What's that date? February 5th?
Just declare your conflict on it, let people know you want a storage No, before we.
Okay, so I make a motion that we schedule a public hearing for February 5th, on the proposed storage container, code modification, or new. I guess we don't have to have it read back, Kelly's not here. I just saw that she's,
No, I think you're
But
good.
I was
Storage
about to
container
say,
code modification.
is
That's
that good enough, and she wasn't there?
Can I get a second?
Second,
All those in favor?
aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? All right, the ayes have it. Moving on to number 8, appeal authority discussion. So Dan, if you wanna take
Yep.
that?
Okay, I got some stuff ready on this. This is not, not that the other is really pressing, but this one is not pressing. I also don't have language, so I will bring you language next time. We've been talking about this for some time, that right now we have a Board of Adjustments. In fact, let's call this is a table here. We've talked about, updating it from Board of Adjustments to a appeal authority. For some time, we were gonna try to do it as part of the subdivision process update. Although the Board of Adjustments is bigger than subdivisions, it's actually how you appeal any land use decisions. It's also how you get variances, it's how you appeal fees, and land use decisions from the city council, land use decisions from this body are all heard by the Board of Adjustments. This is a section of practice and code that has evolved for cities and from the state. The state no longer, in fact, you talk to most like planners and they hear that we have a Board of Adjustments and they're like, oh, that's kind of an old way of doing it, you know. Now they just, in all the state code, it just says appeal authority. Technically, our Board of Adjustments is our appeal authority, but the practice nowadays is to, rather than have a committee of citizens like you guys to act in a quasi-judicial role, to actually have somebody who's more of a like a professional who really understands land use really well and all of the nuances to hear an appeal and to grant variances. And then your appeal from the appeal authority is district court, right? So what we have talked about doing was what the county does, what Enoch does, what Cedar City does. They contract with a specific person, think a city planner from another city or an attorney who specializes in land use to hear appeals. So the difference in the concept that we would look at is there's no change in the purpose of what it does. The number of members goes from 5 down to single person. By the way, they're still by definition a public body subject to Open to Public Meetings Act. So the public can be there, and minutes of the meeting have to be taken and what was done and all of that stuff. So it's not like stuff happens in like a dark smoke-filled room that's hidden. It's just that it's one person, and one person is a quorum versus 3 is a quorum of 5. Some proposed changes would be the Board of Adjustments. It currently says is appointed by the legislative body. We would probably just make it more consistent with the way we define all of these things. Appointment by the mayor with advice and consent of city council. That keeps the mayor involved in appointments, which is our best practice. The term right now of Board of Adjustments is 5 years. We would then just move it to a contractor agreement.
Would it be, sorry, didn't mean to jump in.
No, jump, please.
Well, if you're gonna have it appointed by the mayor, and what happened to my screen?
I think I bumped something.
Look at mine.
If we have appointed by the, mayor, would it not make sense for the contract, if it is a contract, for it to be a 4-year? So that whether the mayor's re-elected or a different person is elected, they can either choose to keep that person or to pick somebody else?
Yeah. Yep, if they are no longer available or we're unhappy with their work, we could terminate that contract, similar to the way our attorney is appointed right now.
Yeah.
Think of it as we're subcontracting this out to a professional by contract. We like how they're doing, we keep them there. If we don't, I think it's an HDMI issue.
It's not the power, it's something else.
HDMI. Got it. Thank you.
Must have wiggled it right.
So, I'm sorry, so by saying by contract and agreement, that would be suffice, or 4 years would be?
No, if it's a volunteer committee, we always do it by term. You serve for a term, and then your term ends, and you're either reappointed or not. With this type of an arrangement, it's almost would be exclusively just by contract.
Okay.
You could do it by term, but it doesn't really make a lot of sense for
Is
something like
that way, if say another mayor or whatever council wants to change it, they can. You know, they're not, you know,
You're not
it
stuck to a
doesn't
term.
mean that person's in for a period of time, like 4 years, and then they're not able to be changed out.
I've gotta say that, a single person compared to committee of 5 sounds a lot less democratic.
Well, I was gonna bring up about independence, like a third-party independent who is, yeah.
So keep in mind, the initial decisions on all these things are done by, really, you guys and the city council.
Excuse me.
This is what happens when somebody feels like you have not followed your own code. So it's having an expert look at it, and by the way, when they look at it, they're gonna look at your reasons and evidence. They're gonna look at this like a judge does and say, okay, I don't necessarily care about like the
outcome.
the public clamor, or whether I like this person or I don't like this person. It is, did the city follow its own rules in doing this? And that's how they're gonna say yes or no, the city followed its own rules.
But like, one person, you could always come back and say, well, I think they had nepotism for this or that. I think like,
And that's why it can be appealed to the district court.
But there's also, and there's still gonna be a checklist that they have to kind of follow.
And by the way, most of the time when you hire this person, you try and get somebody who's totally objective, not even like, for example, Cedar City, they have the county's planning commission and county commission on land use issues, they actually use a Cedar City attorney. So Cedar City attorney has no skin in the game. They're just looking at it and say, okay, when the county told them no, they can't do that in that zone, did they follow their own code in letting them do that or not? And then they have to follow those 5 rules. One of the problems we've had with our Board of Adjustments is somebody appeals it because we have either administratively said, nope, it's clear as day, you can't do it in the code, and they're like, I demand an appeal, so they get an appeal. Then they have to look at the 5 rules, and those 5 rules would stay the same. I can pull them up.
That's what
so
I
is
was
Parowan looking
referring
at
to,
having
and
like a lawyer or something, because you just said a member of the community? Like,
No,
or I-
no, actually, we would,
there's like,
we would look at probably having, either an attorney or a professional planner review
Okay.
it.
So Brian does it this way, and it works really well. And it gets used a lot up there. So ours is Paul Bittman from Cedar City. He's the city manager, and in the cases
And he's an attorney.
and he's an attorney. And the bright side is the times that it's like he's ruled against the city, it's because we needed to fix our code, and it was a good opportunity to tighten it up.
right,
But most of the time, it's very objective.
So the only way you can give a waiver or modification is when you hit these 5 rules, and you have to hit all of them. And usually it's when, like there's times when a variance is appropriate, but it's a pretty high bar. And our Board of Adjustments that we've had, every time we've convened them and used them, they are absolutely in agony, and they're like, I'm never doing that again, because I have this person in front of me, and I just have to follow all these rules, and I can't use my own heart or brain. I have to administratively do the X, Y, Z, and they're like, that's it, I'm never gonna serve on this again. And so then we're trying to retrain and get somebody new, and
alrighty.
Yeah, I'm good with it being one person as long as it is an independent third-party expert.
yeah.
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 And we could even write that in, that it needs to be somebody with expert knowledge of land use in Utah.
Mhm.
And by the way, we do have, use of this every couple times a year. There's been a couple of near misses in the past month, and I have said, we don't have a Board of Adjustments convened right now. Well, we do, but we know several of the members that last time we had it, they said, never again. I don't know if you remember the llama thing,
Mhm.
and then we had one again
It was
convened.
an emotional support alpaca.
The alpaca. We had another one where we had looked at the front yard, and our code was really vague. But then we actually found some other code, and it kind of solved it, but the person withdrew and resubmitted to fit our code. But, one of the members was really angry at me, said, "You just made us be the bad guys." And I'm like, "No, it was black and white, and they couldn't do it per our code." He's like, "You just wanted us to be the bad guys to tell them no." And I'm like, "I already told them no." They appealed to you to tell them yes, and you have to follow these rules if you want to tell them yes. And they're like, "Well, we can't do that, 'cause the rules we can't." And I was like, "I know. That's the thing." And they're like, "We don't ever want to do this." 'Cause they're kind of thinking of themselves as a planning board, which is administrative, and you have a little bit of wiggle room. And then, of course, legislative with city council, on certain issues, they have a lot of latitude, but anyways. So, 5 years, meetings as needed, no change, role quasi-judicial, by the way, that's straight out of state code. Time limit of appeal, state code says that we may, as a local entity, put a time limit on, if they want to appeal, they have to apply within so many days of the land use decision being done. Our current code puts that at 15 days. And there's a lot of cases that we've studied when we go to these land use seminars and stuff like that, where somebody appealed after the 15 days. And you want to have a time limit, because what happens if it's 5 years later? Everybody's gone, circumstances have changed, you don't have the good evidence of why did they decide what they decided. So it's pretty typical to have like 2 weeks to 30 days. Our code says 15. We could change that if we wanted, but that's what our code says. One thing that is kind of weird that we would want to change is the Board of Adjustment adopts its own rules for procedure. Think Robert's Rules of Order. We would want to wipe that out if we have an appeal authority. We would have the city council say, "No, these are your rules.
Yeah,
You can't just go change your own rules,
yeah.
guy or gal," right? And subject to Open Public Meetings Act, yes. And I have the state code if you want to look at it, but it's not really that interesting. And then if you wanted to go do your own research on it, I can bring this back with some red line stuff, and we can kind of whittle through it and talk about it. We're certainly not ready to schedule a public hearing on it, because all we have is a concept of the things that we want to modify.
No, I just wanted to add, after every uncomfortable experience that was already referenced, we've talked to other people in other cities, and they've said, this is definitely the way to go. Nobody has said, oh, don't go there. They've said, this is the way to go, like strongly. I think Reed even said, this is the way to go, this is what everyone's going to do.
Most people are surprised that we still do it the way we do.
Yeah, and the Board of Adjustments, I mean, I would use the word horrified. They're always just horrified.
Mhm.
Bad experience.
Yeah.
And you try to put good people on there, and they're mad at you. So.
Well, I like this, I think it's good.
Okay, well, that's all I have on that, so I'll bring back some language for you then.
Perfect. All right, moving along. Number 9, airport overlay update.
Okay, I'll be quick, because we want to go home at some point. Okay, I brought this up several times. We were required to have airport overlay zone adopted by state code, adopted and enforcing of it by the end of 2024, by December 31st, 2024.
Oh.
But there was a reason why I didn't panic and get it to you, because we already have one. We have met with the airport board, we've looked through it, and had a pretty good discussion. They wanted me to make some changes and come back to them with so it has to be consistent with Rule 14, Part 77, that is regulations, rules by the FAA. There's a lot of things regarding slope of takeoff. Part 47 is very technical, and our airport overlay zone is very technical. And when we make these adjustments, I'll go into the detail. and the reason we're gonna need to go into the detail is, although we do have an airport overlay zone, we do not have it mapped on our zoning map. And we need to literally do an overlay on our zoning map. 'Cause you can still stay in an R1 zone, but you're affected by an overlay. That's the way overlays work. The effect of this law that the state passed, 2003 House Bill 206, it said, that you have to have one of these, and in the past, you were allowed to have one if you wanted to. Now it says ye shall have one and enforce it. The reason why they are getting a little heavy-handed, you might ask, why does the state care if we have an airport overlay zone or not? And the reason boils down to this. Airports are established out in big open areas where it makes a lot of sense, and you have planes coming in and taking off, and it's loud, and it's whatever. What happens is you have urban sprawl, we encroach on the airport. Then you'll have somebody build close to the airport, and then people live there like, you know what, I really don't like those planes there. And now they start giving pressure to the city council, you know what, get rid of that dang airport. And so, and the airport is something that the city has built and invested millions and millions of dollars, its own money, and all of the money that we get from the FAA to build them, which we're on the hook for. To get rid of an airport, you basically have to write a check for, you have to reimburse the FAA for all the millions they put into it, discounted for time and all of that stuff. And so, and there's just a lot of conflict as you have encroachment, right? So, a lot of the parts of the airport overlay zone, what it says is, you notice somebody that, they want a building permit, you say, okay, that's fine, you can have a building permit. You, just so you know, you're under the approach path. And so later, when they come back and they say, this thing is loud, they're like, yep, it's recorded in your deed that you're aware that you're in this zone, this approach zone. So you kind of take away the legal teeth for them suing the airport because the airport is loud. Now, we currently have some complaints about our airport and the path because it comes right over the city. We're one of a few cities that is like got an airport so close, and the approach path is right over the old town, right? And so we're getting more and more complaints about that. And we're actually working, the airport board is working to try and you can put what's called a preferred path due to noise, something, I can't remember the exact language, basically says to any pilot who's taking off, as soon as you are airborne, please bank to a certain heading. You're not legally required to if it's not safe, but pilots know we want you to turn right here rather than go all the way out at a straight. And so we're gonna try to get that modified to try. We want to be good neighbors. Airports want to be good neighbors. Cities want people to get along and be happy. But what we want to do is we want to limit what that encroachment. So we already have airport overlay, and it says that we shall notify and we shall get these easements recorded when somebody does a subdivision, so all the lots, when they go to build, they're aware of it and all of that stuff. We were just not required by state law to enforce our own ordinance, and now we are required to have it, and we're required to enforce it. So airport board wanted me to look at it and make sure that it's consistent with the most recent Part 77 rules on distances, width from the center line, and all of that stuff, slopes and all that stuff. And then we wanted to update our definitions, because our definitions is probably a little old, and there's good definitions. Oh, here's next steps. Update definitions, double check that it's current with Part 77 language. I just explained what they actually call that, and that is not a typo. It's called an navigation easement. Think navigation minus the N, and that's related to aviation. So an navigation easement and notification is required. So those that build and encroach are aware of it. By the way, our current zoning and the way these overlays work, they will not permit, it may be allowed in a certain zone for you to put a school, but if it's within the approach zone, you can't there's certain things that are restricted, where you're gonna have high concentrations of people. You can't put like an arena,
Hospital?
Yeah,
a hospital, there's certain things that you can't put, even if it's allowed in our zoning, that's the way an overlay works, and that's already in our code, and anyways, I'm just letting you kinda know how that works. The fact that we do not have it updated on our zoning map, I'm gonna get a quote from Sunrise, who does our mapping, and I've asked, our airport consultant to get our shape file of our existing overlay, so that I can get it to Sunrise, or Keith can get it to Sunrise, usually that Keith loves to be delegated those stuff. And we will bring all of that back, and we'll update our airport overlay zone, which is in Title 15. Airport board will do a recommendation, send it to you guys will have a public hearing and do a recommendation, send it to city council.
okay.
So I'm just, kind of bringing you up to speed. As you can see, to create one from scratch is a lot of work. So when I found that we had one already, I was like, good. We were struggling so hard to get our subdivision stuff over the finish line and all that. And I have like 5 different copies of other cities and counties' airport overlay zones, and man, I was ready to get into a bunch of work, and I was like, dude, we have it. And ours is actually pretty dang close to what most of the recently adopted ones is. So I don't think we need to do other than just a few little tweaking. Oh, jump back to Board of Adjustment. We need to update all the parts in our code that refers to Board of Adjustment if we change to Appeal Authority and just change the word Board of Adjustment to Appeal Authority. And this is one section where if you want to appeal that, you go to the Board of Adjustments, right?
Okay.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
When you were talking about, the easement or the whatever that thing was.
Navigation.
Yeah.
Yep.
That would be tied to the deed of
Yeah.
the property?
Yep.
Is that going to happen with other overlays in the city?
We don't have any other overlays. There are different overlays that cities have been considering related to densities and different things like that. We haven't been actively looking at any other overlays.
The historic is not?
The historic is the concept is the same as an overlay, but we actually just define the district. So it is an overlay in effect. And your point is, and we have discussed this in historic preservation, we need to be notifying and doing all that stuff administratively. Doing an overlay that requires a deed recording when somebody, the problem is this: these are put on when somebody builds a house the first time, and when a subdivision is built. The historic preservation district is by definition mostly already built out. In your case, you bought an empty lot and built a house.
No.
Or you bought a lot.
I bought a house that was newly built.
Oh, you bought a house that was newly built. But I'm saying most of the historical district is built out, so we would only, if we did that, it would only be required to be recorded maybe on a building permit of like a major remodel or a new construction on an empty lot.
Yeah.
But we could do it. It's a great idea. We need to notify people when they come into this city and they buy a house that's in the historical district. They need to know that they are. Otherwise, they're like,
Well,
they're told, hey, by the way, you gotta come in and get a permit after the fact you've already done this.
in real estate terms, technically, that's called due diligence.
Yep.
And it's on the seller.
Oh, it is, technically,
So-
but we have all decided, time and time again, people are like, I would've been happy to comply had I known. You didn't do a good enough job notifying me. It is due
Yeah.
diligence, for sure.
Yeah. All right, and with that, David, do you have anything to update us on, or
No, thank you.
Shane?
Nope.
Heather?
Nope, I got my email figured out, so I'm good.
Weston?
Nope.
Dan?
Nope.
All right, with that, I need a motion.
I make a motion that we adjourn.
Second?
I'll second.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
All right, we're adjourned. Thanks, guys.
Sorry about that first hour.
That's okay.
Yeah.
It mixed me up. You did? I saw that, but I didn't hear it.
Weston second.
Is that your texting alert?
That means I got an email.
Oh.
My text sounds like a typewriter.
Every time I'm looking over here